panelist is Joe Knappen. Joe is a freelance journalist, formerly of the Door County Advocate, and most recently a CNA now as well. Congratulations. Joe gave us quite an extensive bio, so I'm going to just kind of weed through this and hit some of the highlights. Joe's a Sturgeon Bay boy. He graduated from Sturgeon Bay High School. He went to UW Eau Claire, where he worked on The Spectator, the school's newspaper. In 75 and 76, he worked for the Muscatine Daily Journal in Muscatine, Iowa. At that time, he conducted one-on-one interviews with Jimmy Carter and other candidates during the 1976 presidential campaign. Very impressive. 76 through 80, he was a general assignment reporter, feature writer with the Green Bay Press-Gazette. In 80 and 81, he took a jaunt down to San Francisco, and he worked for Bay City News Service. At that time, he interviewed Ron Kovic, whose life story later became the movie Born on the 4th of July. He also interviewed singer Joan Baez during her campaign to bring relief to Africa and cover legal aspects of the aftermath of Jonestown. Again, very, very important stuff there. In 1988 through 2008, he was the news reporter and assistant editor of the Door County Advocate. Joe's also a volunteer firefighter and first responder for Southern Door Fire Department. And his family had owned, many of you probably know this, Knappen's Bakery in downtown Sturgeon Bay for many, many years. Joe was honorably discharged in 1970 from the U.S. Army after serving 30 months on active duty, including extended tours in Vietnam. He has earned the Army Commendation Medal, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Ribbon, and 3 Vietnam Campaign Stars. I know Joe because I used to work along with him. When I worked for Door County Publishing, Door County Magazine, my offices were right beside the editorial offices for the Door County Advocate. And Joe and I were we were usually the first 2 people in the office every morning. And I got to know him quite well. I used to take offense to the fact that he would refer to me, this was 8 years ago, that he used to call me a kid all the time. I used to hate that, but now as I'm quickly approaching my 40th birthday this year, it doesn't sound quite so bad anymore. So, you hear all this, he has a real impressive journalistic background, but I'm going to share something that he doesn't share with a lot of people, and he actually mentioned to me tonight. He said, "Don't talk about this subject," and I said, too late. But it's a personal subject. And
she's just a kid.
Thank you, Joe.
Good shot, Joe.
Personally, I feel that being a parent is one of the greatest responsibilities there is. And Joe was also a parent. And he and his wife Laura have kind of taken it to the next level. They are not only raising their own children, but they also bring foster children into their home. And a lot of these children also have physical handicaps and special needs. And you've been doing this for how many years? 10 years. 10 years. And have also adopted from these children. So I think that's just so great. And what greater gift can you give a child than to bring them into your heart and into your home? And thank goodness for people like Joe who are willing to do that for kids. So, okay, enough gushing. I'll share what people had to say about Joe. Not quite as nice as what I just said. No. Tenacious pest, persistent. Priceless local color. Goofy, knowledgeable, dedicated Door Countyite. Solid, honest journalist. Investigative, locally minded. Old school gentleman. Ink-stained wretch.
Ooh, cool.
But that's a compliment. In parentheses, that says a compliment. So, and the last comment is, the Advocate lost all of its historical context when he left. With that, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Knappen.
Wow. I kind of feel like I died. That was a pretty nice, that's a great eulogy. I appreciate that. I'm very honored to be here. I'm stuck in here with some business people who've accomplished quite a bit on their own. My niche is writing. I'm a writer. I learned to report, I learned to research, I write. But at the heart of my writing is the people. It's people that I grew up with in Door County. I never thought I'd work for the Advocate. Boy, I got out of here. When you grow up, I was born and raised in Sturgeon Bay. And Ed can tell you, when you grow up in this neighborhood, there are no jobs. There's nothing to look forward to. So the best thing out is a Greyhound bus. Well, there's no bus. The best thing out ought to be the train, but they pulled out the tracks in the 60s, and I can't afford a plane. So we haven't come real far in 40 years. We're not making a place where our kids can work, and I feel bad about that. I feel worse about that since my job got cut. I put a lot of time into the Advocate, but before I put time there, I put time into Door County with the family bakery. And I think it's noteworthy that more people remembered Knappen's Bakery, Uncle Jim's Donuts, and Grandpa's Cookies than remember anything that I wrote for the Advocate. When I was in high school, there were 24 grocery stores in the city of Sturgeon Bay. Now you get 3. Used to be at least 2 in every village going up and down the line. And I know because I used to pack that 40-count line full of donuts and bread and run them and make sure that I hit every stop on the lakeside in time to catch the ferry. And you got to get all that stuff over to Man's store. Those people on the island won't eat. And then you hit every store on the way back down the bayside. So a lot of people, I know the county, I know the people's names. I might not know your faces, but I know what you live with. A lot of people come up to Door County thinking that we're running up here to get away from something. But I don't think that's the way it is. I think what we're doing is we put our back to the sea and we're trying to keep the rest of them from pushing us off the big rock. That's the way I grew up. Got a lot of education in the military, got a lot of education in college. A lot of education working for some newspapers in some very strange cities. Muscatine, Iowa is the same place Sam Clemens started. It's the same place he got his inspiration for Tom Sawyer. San Francisco is indeed Baghdad by the Bay, but the distance from San Francisco to San Jose is Gills Rock to Green Bay. You put 9 million people here, and it's not going to be real pretty. We already know the issues. We talk about them in all the news, whatever media it is: water quality, air quality, population, what's good to eat. You want to drink your ink, you may have to. When I got into the news, I got into it kind of accidentally. I was looking for something after I got out of the Army, and I started writing. I had a gift for writing. People would tell me stories, and I could put them out in a way that read well. So that was cool. It didn't really click with me until I'd been at the Advocate and I started making stronger connections to the people. And one of the people that taught me that was an old girlfriend who ran into me on the street one day and said, hey, you write a lot of words for the Aggravate, but some of that crap's really boring. And after that, every time I sat down at a typewriter, and we had typewriters when I started, I could see that lady's face, and I didn't want it to be boring. So as we graduated to computers and did things like that, I tried to make it a little more exciting. Not change it, make it live for people. The guy that does that really well is Norb Bly, and I'm sorry Norb's not here. Norb has an entirely different take on things, and he and I used to go at each other's throats. We met finally last year. This is true. We've been battling each other in print, by phone, by whatever, for a long time. He was writing in the 70s when I was in college. He wrote about some of my relatives. Gus Klinke is my grandfather's brother. We go way back. We got heritage. But I finally sat down and had coffee with Norb. It took us 2 hours, and we still haven't finished. If he'd be here, we'd dominate things, and we'd still be talking after everybody went home. What's important to us is writing the words, getting things correct, getting the meanings, getting the nuances. And one of the things that impresses me about the Advocate going back is that's always been a theme there. Talk about Lawrence University. Lawrence University was near and dear to the Harrises. Chan was not my first boss, but Chan's family started the paper in 1862. There's room for competition. There were 4 papers at one time on the peninsula. You had to have a Democrat, a Republican, an Independent, and a in your eye. Okay, now it's a little bit things have changed a little bit, and I've got some more technology. But I think that what I've seen at the Advocate is that as the Advocate grew and changed, it tried to reflect its community the best way it could. My mentor, the gentleman that we all speak of with great respect when we talk about news in Door County, is Chan Harris. Chan learned a lot from his family, but this community bent over backwards to protect Chan Harris and Chan's newspaper because Chan's parents were murdered. And the community gathered around that boy in 1951 and protected him and made sure that he and his business kept going. And Chan remembered that, and Chan paid that back. And that's something that his successors in the news media have not done a very good job at all, is to keep track of community and pay back. You could have all of the Peninsula players you want, and you'd find Chan Harris in the audience. And you name any event, something at the auditorium, something with, you picked. If it had to do with Door County, Chan was there. He'd watch baseball. He started that inter-school track meet to give all the schools the message of the importance of sports. He wasn't that great of an athlete himself, but he knew the importance of all those components. I brag about Chan because Chan's heart is in the Advocate. Chan's heart is in the vault on the first floor where you can read every page of the Advocate from 1862 to today. And that used to be one of the most enjoyable parts of my job, is to do traveling back and to pick those segments from each year as we go through and what was important to those people at that time. None of that is done anymore. We've been corporatized. We've been downsized, we've been finagled, we've been flim-flammed, we've been Gannettized. Gannett owns 100 daily newspapers, almost 1,000 weekly newspapers. By the time they cut my job in December of last year, they had reduced their worldwide staff from about 40 or 50,000 to about 20,000. Last week they cut another 2,000. In the last 2 years, their stock dropped from $60 a share to $3. And in the meantime, look what they did to your media. They cut the heart out, they cut the people out. What they're using the Advocate for, and the Green Bay Press Gazette, the Manitowoc Herald Times, and the Kewanee and Algoma and all the rest, is to make money to pay back the debt that they spent to buy all those newspapers and to pay their shareholders. Last year, they returned 40% on the dollar. Unconscionable. Criminal. And you still buy the rag? But I'm sorry, I'm not here to slam Gannett because it's happening across the country. I thought it was only me that noticed, but there's a gentleman that works in the courthouse in Sturgeon Bay, and I won't embarrass him by naming him, but he talked last week. And he said, it's terrible what's going on with that paper. And I said, yeah, it's getting real thin and there's not much in it. No, he said, it's terrible that there's no journalism there. And it's terrible what Gannett is doing, not only here, and not only Gannett, but the others, Lee Enterprises, the Tribune, you name it. Pick your poison. They're not watching local government. He works for government, and he's telling me nobody's watching. Not that there's enough to steal in Door County. What? Or not that if you buy a politician, he'd stay bought. But nobody is there to keep tabs and to keep the fight going. For a while, it was guys like Steve Kastner and Nord Bly or Poison Pen guys would write, keep things active. When somebody's watching, you keep the debate going. When somebody's watching, you can't slide things through. You can't build a bridge nobody wants. You can't pull weeds that we need to filter our water. You can't kill off the dragonflies just because they're a little tiny guy. You can't poison the water just because it's cheap. Somebody's got to watch. Without media, without the Pulse. Pulse is growing. I'm proud of these guys. I'm proud of Gannett, really, because what they've done is create opportunity. Last year, when we were bemoaning the loss of thousands of jobs, Wrightstown and Kaukauna had their papers closed down by Gannett, and guess what? Today there are newspapers in those communities. You watch. Last month, Gannett made the decision to run all the editorial content for Kewanee out of its Algoma office. You watch. That's pattern. they'll close Algoma, they'll close the Advocate. And down the road someday, you'll pick up your Press Gazette, and then on Monday it'll be the Algoma page, and on Tuesday you'll see the Kewanee page, and on Wednesday you'll see the Marinette page. And it still won't be any content, and there still won't be anybody watching. And what's really sad to guys like me and Nord Bly is there won't be any art. These guys are doing art, but art in the use of words that clearly, honestly describes what's going on is art that to me is ABC, accurate, brief, clear. One last comment. I'm running long here and I apologize.
Nope. 30 seconds.
Wow. Go. I never got to be the editor of the Advocate. I never really wanted to. I was never offered the job either, and for a lot of reasons. You never put your loose cannon at the front of the troops. Regardless of what's in my heart, regardless of what's in my head, I felt that my job as a frontline news guy was to be that abrasive that I would help polarize the dialogue, encourage the comments from one side or the other. If that meant that I had to insult you to make you speak or ignore you to get you to come talking, that's the technique that was used. Most of you are old enough to remember black and white TV. There was an old program called Rawhide, Rowdy Yates. Rowdy Yates was the #2 guy. Rowdy Yates was Clint Eastwood. He was my hero. The neat thing that I bought from him was that #2 makes shit happen. And when you go to work for a guy, you got a guy like Dave that's making decisions about money and advertising, transportation. You got other people making other decisions about who to hire, who to fire, where this comes from, that comes from, how to pay these bills. But somebody's got to get the thing done once the order is given. I made myself Rowdy Yates, and it's not a comfortable position, and it's not a popular position. But by God, I trained a lot of journalists who are out there and can handle this business really well.
Thank you very
much,
much,
I'm mad at
Joe.
some of them, but anyway, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Joe. We can chat more after.
Okay. Let me make one comment quick. I embarrassed everybody else a little bit, but I need to give, I don't want to run out of time and forget to do this. Ed Allen and his dad put a lot into this community, the same way the Harris family did. But one of the things that always struck me that made WDOR will always be a rock, because we know how big football is around here. Green Bay Packers are the Green Bay Packers are the Green Bay Packers. Well, the new kid on the block's got the Packer coverage. And the reason is local, and it's a conscious decision that the Allen family made. Because a doggone football games start before church is over, and they carry church. And if we don't have God as part of our media, if we don't have God as part of our lives, we don't have a good life. And I want to thank the Allen family for that.
Thanks again, Joe.
That's tribute.